here tonight is...
Of the three Smiths, who are Johnny, Andy, and Mike.
You didn't make it to one of your last show in New York because Mike got sick, correct?
Yes, and we were asked to leave the country. It's really quite dangerous. He had a contagious disease, which was chicken pox, so we really had to leave straight away. And it was really quite serious. And also some other members contracted critical flu, so we were really on the danger list.
To step back in time a bit, band was formed in Manchester. Did it start with just you and Johnny?
Yes, it was just Johnny and I for quite a while, and we just wrote together. And then Johnny found the other two members and roped them in. And then we started working quite extensively and violently in January. So we're really just a year old as a present group.
How did you and Johnny get together and start writing together?
Heaven knows. I just opened the door one day and there he was. Exactly how he found me, I still haven't quite made it... He hasn't made it clear. He just appeared at the door one day. It sounds really fanciful, but that's exactly how it happened. And said, would you like to write and form a group? You know, it's very basic and fundamental, and that's the way it happened. But it was very strange for me because I had tried to do it for a very long time. And then during this period that he came, I had decided that I would no longer try. And then everything happened. It's very weird.
You write the words and Johnny writes the music. Had you been writing music before this, or had you been doing other sorts of writing?
Well, yes. For as long as I've been alive, I've been writing persistently. But I also think up vocal tunes, which are often completely different from the actual musical tune that Johnny devises. So I've always had a very musical head, if you like. But yes, I've written words for years and years.
So the band started playing about last January in Manchester. When did you start to come to the attention of people in London and elsewhere?
Well, it was really when we came to London and began to play here, and we've played here quite excessively since March. In March of last year, we found our record contract with Rough Trade, and we began to appear a lot in London, and everything seemed to happen as soon as we come to London. The press began to notice us, and it just all really snowballed.
I've read that as far as the Manchester scene goes, there's a lot of bands there that you're just not fond of the way they're so heavily into alienation and...
Yeah, there isn't a great deal of point to this attitude, and it seems as though they're really enchained in their own backyard with their own ideas, which if they believe in, it's fine for them, but it doesn't really seem to get you very far. It doesn't seem to reach people, and it's not very positive. So therefore, ultimately for me, it has no value whatsoever.
You've just moved to London. Was it for reasons such as that, or just because it's more efficient? Or?
Well, it's really completely business. I mean, I have to be here for 6 out of 7 days, and just traveling to and fro every day was complete lunacy because of the distance. So it's really a mental necessity above everything else. But obviously, if I have a choice, I would not live here. But I really have to be here.
So the rest of the band has stayed in Manchester?
Yes.
Does that create any problems as far as communicating with the band? And
not really. Not as far as I can see. Things really continue as they always have done. We just simply get together occasionally and work, and that's how things happen. We aren't interlocked night and day, even though we all lived in the same city. So it's not as though any rift will appear.
How did you go about choosing Rough Trade, or did they sort of seek you out?
Well, at the time, we had lots of company interest, and it just seemed that Rough Trade were the most human. And I liked that idea. They were down to earth, and they were very forthright. And they said, this is what we can do for you, and this is what we cannot do for you. But ultimately, we'll do our best. With the majors, it really wasn't like that. There seemed to be lots of fanciful nonsense about major record companies. So at the time, Rough Trade just seemed to suit us more than anybody else, and that's why we chose them.
And your first single was Hand in Glove, and the B-side was Handsome Devil?
Yeah.
When was that released?
That was released in April. It was recorded in March and released in April.
The singles that you've released, were they stuff that you've had around, that you've been working on, or has any of it been really new?
Well, When we recorded This Charming Man, we had only had it for 2 weeks. We had just written the song, and we really felt this had to be released at once, and we all felt a particular energy about the song, and we were just this very strange urgency to have it released straight away. So This Charming Man was a very, very new song when it was recorded. But what difference does it make, which has followed it, is a very, very old song. Johnny and I wrote it something like 18 months ago.
Have you guys decided, you're working on an album now, is that correct?
Well, it's finished, and it's due for almost immediate release, which means at least a month away. So we have worked on it for a very long time. We recorded it in July, believe it or not, and August, but we completely scrapped all the tapes, so we had to redo the whole thing. So it's been a very lengthy and very expensive process, but finally it's finished and it's ready to be released, and I really expect the highest praise. It's really monumental.
Are there any tracks on it that we are already familiar with?
I think so. Some, if you've seen the group live, you will be familiar with some, but there are a few that we haven't performed live, and I think that's really quite necessary, because I really don't want people to get too bored or too familiar with everything.
So that we know none of the singles are on it?
What difference does it make is on it, and a re-recording of Hand in Glove is on it, but This Charming Man is not. So we'll just see, just hurl it out and see what happens.
In America, it's going to be released on...
Sire.
Did you work out a good understanding with them? Or is it more just working mostly with Rough Trade here, and that's just a distribution deal?
What, Sire? Is that... Perhaps mainly, yes. I mean, it sounds a bit brutal to say that it's just a distribution deal, but I suppose really at the end of the day, that's exactly what it amounts to. But they seem quite fairly agreeable, the people at Sire, and we haven't had enormous contact, but everything seems quite suitable, and the money they offer is quite high, even though we're in such extreme debt that most of it is already gone. But it seems quite agreeable on most levels, so I'm quite pleased. It will be released in America on February the 28th.
Are you worried you've gotten such an amazing amount of press, and often with the British press that often leads to a backlash?
It almost always does, but there's not really a great deal that I can do about this. I'm sure it will happen, and there are almost whispering signs of it somewhere. But this is how things go. Nobody is always popular, and nobody gets the support of every living person. This is how the business is, and regardless of what we do in the future, I'm sure there will be a backlash. But it's not something I worry a great deal about, because it's a pleasurable dilemma in the first place to be in the situation where you are receiving a great deal of press. I find it really blank and really pessimistic to sit down and say, oh, we've got all this good press, but I'm really worried about the future. It's really nonsense. I'm just really going to bask in the good press and bask in what's happening now.
Hand in Glove, that was your first single, and it's being remixed for the album. Anything about the writing of it or anything?
Well, really, this is, to me, the most special song that we've ever done. It was our first single, and of course, for that reason, it has great romantic value for me. But I think it was really a very, very special record, certainly in this country. To me, it still sounds like a record that really had to be made. I'm really so pleased that all the emotion and all the urgency comes right through. And I've still not given up hope with it. I still hope that it will go further and become somewhat of an anthem, at least in this country, everywhere, in fact.
How well do you think you're geared up for hitting America now and trying to get across your music to them now?
I think so. It's really up to the American people. It really depends on the amount of scope that America is prepared to have in 1984. Obviously, within recent years, it hasn't showed tremendous scope, but I think many Americans will agree with this point. It's not like a slur against the country. But I really believe that people are ready for something different, and they're waiting for something different, but not extreme and not dangerous. So I think we slip into the kind of category which most Americans must find completely accepting.
Yeah, the band has a very positive attitude. Is that the sort of thing you're trying to get across?
I think so. I think it's really necessary for everybody, not really just in music, but in all walks of life. We really have to be positive now, because the last few years have been too depressing and too inverted. And I think people believe that nothing is possible in life, and we have the nuclear cloud hanging over our head. So people really must kind of wake up and be a bit more assertive. And I think we'll help considerably towards this way of thinking.
Do you think you've already made impact, at least especially in England?
I think we certainly have made a considerable dent in England. I think we have a very, very good position, and I'm very pleased with that. But obviously, there are more people to be reached, and there are other countries to be reached. Everything doesn't stop in London or in England. But I feel enormously comfortable, and I think we have a long way to go, and I'm very pleased about that. I don't feel as though the group is something that will be very short-lived. I feel as though we're still in a very introductory period, even though we've had an enormous amount of press and considerable exposure.
What sort of working relationship does the band have? Is it you and Johnny getting together and discuss, or is it a very collaborative sort of?
It isn't collaborative, really. In the writing sense, it's just Johnny and I. And we just get together when it's necessary to write songs. And when Johnny and I have the absolute skeleton, if you like, of the song, Andy and Mike also come into the picture and contribute their parts. The writing is absolutely constricted to Johnny and I. And, well, obviously, it's just really a very natural process. There's no question about that. I could never, ever sing anybody's words. Anybody else's words, and Johnny could never play anybody else's music.
And also in things I've read, it's talked a great deal about your lifestyle, you know, no drinking, etc., very clean life.
Boring life, very boring life.
Do you think that's just something that's your own business, or do you think it is very important to what you're writing and what you're trying to do?
Well, I think it's both. It really is my business, but I think it's necessary to make one's business public sometimes, if I think it can have a very positive influence on people. I get really tired of the old rock and roll image, the old, you know, drunken, let's have fun persistently for 28 hours a day. I find this really boring, the whole rock and roll star trip. And I think by saying some of the things that I've said about the way that I live, it's really quite a different voice, and it's an unusual voice within this whole sphere. Because nobody can associate being in a group like the Smiths with having such a austere life, if you like, and being so regimented about what one does. So, but I think this is really quite common with people, and yet it's just really certain things about one's personal life that you are not supposed to say. You can't tell people that you don't drink because, you know, it's quite immature and naive. It sounds that way, but I say it because I really believe in it, and I'm not ashamed of the fact that I don't smoke and that I have no interest whatsoever in drugs.
Your brand new single is What Difference Does It Make? That's just been released, and you said it was written quite a while ago.
Yes, it was written a very long time ago. And, you know, people seem to really look for quite staunchly philosophical edges in what I write, and certainly they're there. But what difference does it make just struck me as a very necessary little term. I don't know, what difference does almost anything make? I just wanted to have a very easy attitude, and that's what the lyrics imply. Really, you know, well, people get so neurotic about themselves, their lives, their hair, their teeth, that, you know, what difference does anything make, really?
I just read that you're about to enter into a project with Sandy Shaw, or have you already started on that?
Well, we're really well into the entire product, and it should be released quite shortly. It's just a single, but I think it's an incredibly important record, certainly for her. And already we've had so much media attention and so many of the country's top DJs are very, very eager to have the record that in a way, I mean, it really almost seems like a hit record before it's even released. I'm really pleased, especially for me, that I worshipped her for so long, and then to work with her is just the highest thrill that I can possibly think of.
Yes, I'd read that you were, you know, a big fan of her. What was it like actually working with her? Was it just as you'd expected?
Well, really, I mean, I dribbled for hours and hours. I can't get around this. I can't be very sophisticated about this issue. I was incredibly nervous the first time I met her, but she was such an easy person that suddenly it just seemed as though I knew her for years and